The day the letter arrived, I thought it was a mistake. A thick envelope from Valley First Bank sat in my mailbox, addressed to Daniel Whitmore, co-signer. I ripped it open, standing in the driveway with the Arizona heat pressing down. Inside was a loan statement, $600,000. My name printed bold on the top line, my signature at the bottom of the contract. Only it wasn't my signature. I've run Whitmore and Hayes Construction with my so-called friend Mark Hayes for almost 15 years. We started small, patching roofs, pouring driveways, hustling for every contract. Over time, we grew into mid-size builds, schools, office parks, even a municipal library that made the local paper. We weren't rich, but we were solid, or so I believed. I walked into the kitchen, letter trembling in my hands. My wife, Claire, looked up from her coffee. "What's that?" "A bank statement. 600 grand. I shoved it across the table. Her eyes widened. "Daniel, you never told me." "Because I didn't take it." My voice cracked sharper than I intended. "That's not my signature." I called Mark right away. He didn't answer. I left 3 voicemails. One calm, one angry, one that sounded like begging. By the 4th try, his phone went straight to voicemail. That night, I barely slept. Memories of late nights drafting contracts together. Of Mark swearing, "We'll build something that lasts, brother," kept replaying in my head. Now my brother had apparently signed my life away. The next morning, I marched into Valley First. A young loan officer named Emma pulled up the file. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore, this is a joint loan with Mr. Hayes. Both signatures are on record." I leaned across her desk. "Look at it closely. That's not mine." She frowned, compared the contract to my driver's license. "Honestly, they don't match perfectly. But Mr. Hayes insisted you authorized it." My stomach dropped. "When?" 3 weeks ago. Funds were dispersed immediately." 3 weeks ago, I'd been in Dallas on a school construction site. Mark knew that. I left the bank shaking, a storm gathering in my chest. At home, Claire tried to reassure me. There has to be an explanation. But I knew better. Mark always liked shortcuts. He chased high-risk deals while I stuck to steady growth. For years, I pulled him back from the edge. This time, he hadn't told me where he jumped. I stared at the contract again that night. The bold $600,000 wasn't just debt. It was a weapon. If the company failed, if payments defaulted, my house, my truck, even Kyle's college fund would be swallowed whole. Mark had bet everything with my name on the line. And the worst part? I hadn't even seen his hand yet. If this was the opening move, I dreaded what the betrayal would look like when it surfaced in full. I finally cornered Mark at the job site 3 days later. He was in a hard hat, clipboard in hand, barking orders like nothing was wrong. "Mark!" My voice cut through the noise of diesel engines and hammer strikes. He turned, smile fading when he saw me. "Danny, hey, I was gonna call." "You forged my signature on a $600,000 loan," I shouted. Workers stopped mid-swing, eyes flicking toward us. Mark lowered his voice. "Not here." "Yes, here." I shoved the bank statement against his chest. "What the hell did you do?" He sighed like I was the unreasonable one. "Business needed capital. We were stuck chasing small contracts while competitors scaled up. The loan lets us bid on state projects. It's growth, Daniel." "Growth? By stealing my name? By gambling my house?" He stepped closer, fake calm dripping from his voice. "I didn't steal anything. You've always been cautious, dragging your feet. Someone had to make a move." I stared at him, stunned. "So you decided my future didn't matter?" "It's just business, brother. You'll thank me when the profits roll in. My fists clenched. Around us, men who'd worked for me for years pretended not to stare, but I saw the doubt in their eyes. Mark's words painted me as dead weight. That night, I came home raging. Claire sat at the table, scrolling her phone. "Daniel, we need to talk." "About what?" She hesitated. "Mark told me his side. He says you're overreacting, that the loan's under control, and you're just bitter." I stared at her, ice flooding my veins. "You spoke to him? Behind my back?" "He's been keeping me updated because you're too emotional about it." "Emotional?" My voice cracked. "Claire, our house is collateral. Kyle's college fund is collateral." She slammed her phone down. "And what if it works? What if Mark takes the company to the next level and you're standing in the way? Maybe you should step aside." The words hit harder than the bank letter. My own wife taking his side. I didn't sleep. Images looped in my head. Mark smirking, Claire doubting me, workers whispering. Betrayal had a new face now, not just a forged signature, but the people closest to me believing his lies. By morning, I felt something cold settle in my chest. Mark hadn't just stolen my name. He'd stolen the narrative. And once a liar controls the story, truth becomes exile. But I wasn't going quietly. The next week felt like living in exile inside my own company. It started with an email, or rather, the absence of one. My company address bounced back. "User not found." I called IT. The guy stammered, "Sorry, Daniel. Mark said you were stepping back. He told us to deactivate your access." Stepping back. That was his phrase. Like I'd willingly walked away from the business I co-founded. The locks on the office changed 2 days later. I found out when my keycard flashed red at the front door. A new receptionist I didn't recognize gave me a tight smile. "Mr. Suez Hayes said visitors should schedule appointments." Visitors. 15 years of sweat. And now I was a visitor. Word spread quickly. Clients I'd personally signed called to confirm transition. One, a school district manager, said carefully, "Mark assured us everything's fine. He said you're taking time for personal reasons." His tone carried pity, not respect. At home, Claire doubled down. She forwarded me an article Mark had posted on LinkedIn. "Hayes leads expansion with bold financing." His face beamed under the headline, while my name was absent entirely. Claire's message was short. "Maybe he's right. Maybe you should let him lead." Even Kyle, my 17-year-old, pulled back. One night at dinner, he mumbled, "Uncle Mark says you've been holding the company back. Is that true?" I slammed my fork down. "Kyle, I built that company brick by brick. Don't you dare think I was dead weight." He looked away, muttering, "Just asking." Isolation grew thicker than desert heat. Friends stopped calling. Mutual acquaintances avoided eye contact in the grocery store. The man who used to be known as Steady Daniel, the one who makes things work, had been recast as the bitter partner who couldn't keep up. And Mark, he relished it. Each time I drove past a job site, his name was plastered on banners. Trucks freshly painted Hayes Construction, without mine. Workers I'd hired waved awkwardly, eyes shifting away. At night, I sat in silence, the stack of unpaid bills growing on the counter. My credit cards declined. The bank letters piled higher. I realized Mark's gamble wasn't just professional, it was personal. By freezing me out, by seizing the story, he left me with nothing but shadows. But shadows can hide preparation. One evening, I dug through old files, pulling contracts, copies of signatures, invoices. My fingers trembled as I found patterns, inconsistencies in the way Mark signed my name, dates where I was out of state yet approved deals. He thought isolation would break me. But solitude has a way of sharpening resolve. If Mark wanted me silenced, he'd overlooked one thing. Silence can scream once it finds proof. Proof came from the unlikeliest place, a junior bank officer with more courage than her title suggested. I walked back into Valley First with a folder of my old signatures, ready to demand answers. Emma, the same young officer I'd spoken to before, lowered her voice when she saw me. "Mr. Whitmore, I've been reviewing the loan file. Something doesn't add up." She slid her monitor toward me. The digital record showed the scanned contract, but metadata revealed the signature page had been uploaded separately, weeks after the initial draft. Normally, both parties sign in front of a notary, but Mark insisted you couldn't make it. He dropped off this page later. I thought it was odd. "Because it was forged," I said, heat rising. She glanced around nervously. "I shouldn't be telling you this, but yes, if an auditor sees this, your partner could be in serious trouble." Her quiet confirmation was the first crack in Mark's wall. The next day, I tested it. A group of subcontractors were at the diner near the yard. Men I'd known for years, guys who once trusted me with their paychecks. I slid into a booth beside them, laid out copies of contracts with my signature stamped across dates I'd been in Dallas or Phoenix. One of them, Carl, frowned. "Daniel, I remember you calling me from Texas that week. You couldn't have signed this." "Exactly," I said. "Mark forged it." Word spread faster than wildfire in dry brush. By evening, half the crews were whispering about fraud at the top. 2 nights later, the local Contractors Association hosted a mixer at the Rotary Hall. Mark arrived in a new suit, shaking hands, spinning tales about expansion. I waited until the room was full, then stepped up to the microphone during open remarks. "Funny thing about expansion," I began, pulling a folder from under my arm. "It usually requires trust, and trust dies when your partner forges your name on a $600,000 loan." The room went dead quiet. I held up the contract and Emma's notarized statement. "This signature? Not mine. These dates? I wasn't even in the state. And this bank record shows the upload trail. Numbers don't lie. People do." Mark laughed, forced and brittle. "My brother here's confused. He approved everything verbally." "No," I said, my voice sharp. "You forged. You gambled my house, my son's future. And now everyone knows it." Phones came out. Flashes sparked. The whispers turned into outright gasps. Carl stood up in the crowd. "I worked with Daniel that week. He's telling the truth." The weight shifted. The crowd wasn't just listening. They were believing. Mark's jaw tightened, his eyes darting. "You're destroying us both," he hissed into the mic. "No," I answered, staring straight into him. "You destroyed yourself the moment you picked up a pen that wasn't yours to use." The room buzzed with outrage. What had been whispers of doubt was now public drama, captured in photos, videos, and eyewitness accounts. For the first time, Mark wasn't the untouchable partner with slick words and shiny suits. He was the man cornered by his own lies, and the proof in my hands was heavier than any hammer we'd ever swung together. The fallout from the Rotary Hall confrontation came faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, I got a call from Valley First's collections department. "Mr. Whitmore," the voice on the line said coldly, "the $600,000 loan is delinquent. Unless payment arrangements are made within 10 business days, we will initiate foreclosure on pledged collateral." My throat dried. "Collateral?" "Yes. 2 residential properties and 1 education account linked to your name." I nearly dropped the phone. My son's college fund? Yes, sir. It was listed as a linked savings account under the trust ID provided by Mr. Hayes. I hung up, the room spinning. Mark hadn't just gambled with my house. He'd dragged Kyle's future into his scheme. That night, Claire confronted me, waving her phone. Mark says the bank is only coming after you because you embarrassed him publicly. He says if you sign over your shares, he'll handle the loan himself. I stared at her. Claire, don't you see? That's his play. He risks everything, then offers to save me if I surrender. It's blackmail dressed as generosity. She folded her arms. Maybe he's right. Maybe stepping aside is best. Something inside me snapped. No, he stole my name, my company, my son's future. I'm not handing him the rest of my life like a gift. The next morning, Mrs. Carver from the board called me. Daniel, you should know. Mark pitched a new line of credit to cover the loan. He's using employee pension funds as collateral. My blood ran cold. That's illegal. Exactly. But he's desperate, and some board members are tempted because they're afraid of collapse. If you want to stop him, you need more than rumors. You need undeniable evidence. That evening, I went back through my old files, desperate for a lead. Buried in a dusty drawer was a set of carbon copies from checkbooks Mark had handled while Dad was sick years ago. One withdrawal in particular, $75,000, caught my eye. The signature was smooth, confident. Too confident. Dad's real signatures in his final months were shaky, uneven. This one looked identical to the forged loan contract. My pulse quickened. If Mark had been forging long before, this wasn't a single betrayal. It was a pattern. I called Emma at Valley First. Can you match this old check to the loan signature? She hesitated. That could cost me my job. I'll take the heat, I promised. But if we don't stop him now, he'll drain pensions, wipe out savings, ruin dozens of families. There was a long silence. Then she whispered, Bring it tomorrow. I'll see what I can do. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tide shift. Mark had escalated to financial arson, but in his arrogance, he'd left fingerprints all over the matches. Now it was up to me to strike first. Before his fire consumed everything, Emma came through. She called 2 days later, voice steady but low. Daniel, I ran the comparison. The check signature from years ago and the loan contract? Same hand, not yours. I can't officially release the report, but if you have a subpoena, it'll hold. That was all I needed. Frank Sullivan, a retired fraud investigator Mrs. Carver recommended, drafted affidavits and lined up the forensic match. The trick, Frank said, is timing. If you want him cornered, do it where running isn't an option. The chance came at the quarterly board meeting. Mark had planned a flashy presentation to pitch his visionary expansion, bragging about new credit lines. I walked into the glass-walled conference room in my one decent suit, a binder tucked under my arm. Half the board shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to greet me. Mark smirked. Daniel, this is a closed meeting. Then close it after I'm done. I dropped the binder on the table, because if you don't hear me now, the district attorney will make sure you hear me later. A ripple of unease spread. I opened the binder. This is a forensic analysis of the $600,000 loan. The signature page, forged, not mine. The same hand appears on a $75,000 check from when my father was dying. Mark's hand. Gasps. Eyes flicked to Mark. That's absurd, he barked. He's bitter, trying to drag me down. Emma, seated in the back as a compliance witness, spoke up. I handled the file. The metadata proves the signature page was uploaded separately. It was not authorized in standard procedure. The room froze. I pulled out the next document. Here's your attempt to leverage employee pension funds as collateral for a second loan. Illegal, reckless, and documented with your own emails. One board member slammed his fist. Is this true, Hayes? Mark's face turned crimson. It's business. Risk is part of growth. No, I said, voice rising. Risk is what we agreed on together. Fraud is what you did alone. You gambled my house, my son's college fund, and the futures of every employee here. That's not growth. It's theft. The tension snapped like a wire. Phones came out. Board members whispered to each other. Carl, one of the subcontractors who had witnessed my confrontation at the Rotary, stepped into the room. I was asked to testify. I can vouch, Daniel was out of state during those supposed signatures. Mark lied. The board chair cleared his throat. Given this evidence, we have no choice but to remove Mark Hayes effective immediately pending investigation. And Daniel, you'll be reinstated. Mark lunged forward. You can't do this! You need me! Security moved closer. I met his eyes one last time. You needed me, Mark. But you chose greed. Now all you'll have left are court dates. The guards escorted him out as he shouted, You'll regret this! His voice echoed down the hall, hollow and desperate. Silence filled the room after the door slammed. Then, one by one, board members nodded at me, not with pity but respect. For months, Mark had tried to erase me with forged ink and whispered lies. Tonight, truth carved his empire to dust, and for the first time since the letter arrived, I could breathe. 2 weeks after the board meeting, the fallout had settled into something heavier than celebration, an ache of finality. Robert Hayes, Mark's full legal name, was indicted on charges of wire fraud, forgery, and attempted embezzlement. Valley First froze his accounts. Employees whispered relief that pensions were safe. Clients called to thank me for stepping in. On paper, I'd won. But in private, the questions pressed harder. Mom asked over Sunday dinner, Will you forgive him? You boys grew up together. I set down my fork. He stole my name, Mom. He tried to bury me in debt. He nearly torched Kyle's future. How do you forgive that? She sighed, looking older than I'd ever seen her. Forgiveness isn't for him. It's for you. Kyle chimed in from across the table. Dad, you don't have to forgive him. Just don't let him own your anger too. That hit deep. For months, I'd let Mark write the story. Now, even in defeat, I risked letting him dictate my emotions. The next day, I visited the county jail. Mark looked thinner, eyes darting when the guard led him into the glass booth. He picked up the phone with shaking hands. Danny, he said, voice hoarse, I screwed up. I panicked. Please, if you speak on my behalf, if you tell the judge I meant well, maybe I'll get probation. We can rebuild. I stared at him. The man I once trusted with contracts, with family barbecues, with the roof over my head, reduced to begging. You didn't panic, I said. You planned. You forged. You lied. And when you got caught, you tried to frame it as vision. His eyes filled. So, no forgiveness? I leaned closer to the glass. Forgiveness isn't my job right now. Accountability is. Maybe someday I'll find peace with what you did. But today, you face what you built. I set the phone down. Mark slammed his palm against the glass, shouting my name as the guard led him away. Walking out of that jail, I felt lighter. Not because I hated him less, but because I finally stopped carrying his choices as if they were mine. Forgive or not, Mark would answer to the truth, and I would answer only to myself. The trial didn't take long. With Emma's testimony, Frank's forensic report, and the board's records, The evidence stacked higher than any defense Mark's lawyers could muster. The jury deliberated less than a day before returning guilty on all counts. I sat in the back row of the courtroom as the judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison. His shoulders sagged, his once slick hair limp. The same man who once barked orders over job sites now looked like a husk, swallowed by the very greed he worshipped. People asked me afterward if I felt vindicated. I didn't. What I felt was clarity. I went home, poured myself a glass of bourbon, and sat in the quiet. The mantel clock ticked steady, like it had all those sleepless nights when I feared losing everything. But this time the sound wasn't mocking. It was grounding. Kyle came home from college that weekend. He hugged me harder than usual. "Dad, you did it. You showed everyone the truth." I smiled. I didn't do it to show everyone. I did it to protect us. Claire and I never patched things up. Her loyalty to Mark left scars too deep. She moved out a month after the trial ended. It hurt, but strangely, it also freed me. For years, I'd carried not only the weight of the company, but the illusion of a marriage already half gone. With Mark gone and Claire out of the picture, I faced something new. Choice. For the first time in decades, my life wasn't bound by contracts or forged signatures. It was mine. I didn't return to the old company, even though the board begged me. Instead, I started over. Small consulting jobs, teaching younger builders how to grow steady without shortcuts. The work was honest, the pay decent, and the clients trusted me because they knew I'd fought for the truth when it cost me everything. One evening, I stood in my garage, sorting through old boxes. I found a photo of Mark and me at 28, sweaty and grinning after finishing our first full build. I stared at it for a long time. We'd started as brothers. He ended as a cautionary tale, but me, I walked through betrayal, lies, and near ruin, and I came out not broken, but cleaner. So here's what I know now. Trust isn't about blind loyalty. It's about verification, proof, and accountability. And dignity doesn't come from forgiveness handed out cheap. It comes from choosing yourself when no one else will. I choose me. Tell me what you do. Drop your story and subscribe. Revenge Stories, Men U50 USA.